The storm wasn't just weather, it was punishment. Dark clouds bled across the sky like torn fabric, and the mountains above me groaned with thunder that felt almost alive. My old sedan shuddered with every gathered gust, the steering wheel trembling in my hands as I forced it up the winding dirt road. The wipers screeched across the cracked windshield, fighting rain that struck harder than gravel flung by an angry fist. Every sign I shouldn't be here shouted at me. The growing shadows, the storm, the way even the highway behind had looked like it wanted to erase itself from my rearview mirror. But I kept driving because what lingered behind me was worse than anything this road could throw ahead. Aaron's face still haunted me. Or no worse than his face. It was his voice. Smooth, dismissive, practiced. "You're not enough, Lena. You never were." A line he hadn't even bothered to dress with remorse when he'd chosen someone else instead of me. I'd once thought his love was home. But home had turned into ash.so. I had left everything. My name, my career, my friends who didn't know how to look at me anymore. Everything fit in the trunk. The storm, the road, the silence, they felt cleaner than the world I ran from. Still, the deeper I sank under the ceiling of pines, the stronger the sense crawled over my skin. I wasn't alone on this mountain. Something watched, patient and ancient, older than the road I dared to drive. When the car coughed and died, my heart's rhythm followed. The dashboard lights flickered once, maybe mocking me, before going black. "No, no, no," I muttered, hitting the wheel with the heel of my palm. My voice sounded too small against the storm's pounding fist. Silence settled inside the vehicle like a body dropping in water. Outside, the rain roared, and the atmosphere pressed heavier to heavy, as if the storm itself leaned close to listen. For me, my phone lit bright in my hand, battery at 19%, but signal, nothing. Of course, I had a choice. Sit trapped in this tin can coffin, or walk. I opened the door. Cold rain slapped me across the face, sharp as glass. The mud sucked at my boots, tugging me into the earth like it meant to drown me. The forest pressed in on all sides, trees towering like black pillars lost in the mist. Thunder rolled again, so fierce it vibrated through the soles of my feet. I hugged my jacket closer, eyes darting down the stretch of road glistening under the storm. 10 miles. That's what the map had promised a town. A light, a voice, civilization. 10 miles. I could do that, but the woods didn't look like they'd let me. Because between thunder strikes, I noticed the silence. No crickets, no owl, nothing living that dared break the quiet. It coiled so absolute it made the hairs at the back of my neck rise, and then the howl.it shattered the night like glass. A cry pierced with fury, raw sorrow wrapped in teeth. It wasn't wolf. Not really. I'd heard wolves upstate once, mellow notes lost in the distance. This was deeper. This lived at a register that rattled rib bones and vibrated the lungs until I gasped. The howl unfurled through the trees as if rolling my name inside of it. I froze, breath stuck halfway, unable to remember how to move. Branches cracked in the dark, not light, heavy, deliberate. My body lurched backward a step. "Stay calm," I whispered, even though my shaking voice gave away how useless those words were. Lightning burned the sky open a heartbeat later. And then I saw it. The beast.it first. I thought dream, or nightmare. Its body loomed too massive, paws sinking into mud in silence, shoulders bunching with predatory power. Black fur slicked with rain gleamed like steel, and then its eyes, God. Those eyes, liquid fire, glowing bronze against the downpour. They didn't just look at me. They branded. My pulse thundered louder than the storm. Step by step, it stalked forward. Its growl rumbled out, not just a warning, something that pressed deep into marrow, demanding surrender. I should have screamed, run, hid. I did none, because I locked my lungs. Its power should have devoured me whole. But in that fury, there was sorrow too, deep enough to echo. And underneath it, a recognition I could not name. The world split again in lightning second flash. And where there had been a wolf, suddenly there was a man. He stood where the beast had been, as if storm itself had birthed him from the dark. Tall, broad shoulders hunched, breath hard, chest heaving as if he'd just clawed through a nightmare. His shirt, it was soaked, torn, clinging to muscle that looked both carved strong and wounded delicate. His hair plastered dark strands across his forehead, hiding half his gaze. But when he lifted his face, the eyes, the same burning eyes, I almost fell to my knees as I understood nothing and everything in one glance. Terror, yes, but beneath it, something older, a whisper of fate. My heart begged toward him even as my brain screamed a warning. Instead of screaming, a single word cracked from my mouth, reverent and broken. Beautiful. The stranger's jaw clenched, some war flickering across his face that the storm barely let me glimpse. Silence hurt between us. The trees seemed to bend closer. Somewhere distant, thunder tore the heavens in half once more. Rain plastered hair against my cheek. Mud fought my boots. My throat closed as if words could choke me. But I knew one thing before breath found me again. This man, this impossible wolf, wasn't just danger. He was fate, and whatever had just found me on this road, I would never outrun it. Not in 10 miles. Not in 10 years. Not ever. For a long moment, time struggled to decide whether to keep moving. Thunder cracked so close that the ground shivered beneath us. But I hardly registered it. My gaze had caught on him, this man torn from shadow and storm, his chest rising, every muscle tense as if he were still wearing the wolf skin beneath his own. His eyes stayed locked on me. Hot, brilliant, unnatural. A hunter's stare wrapped in a human face. I forced air down my throat until it rasped. What are you? The question hissed out of me, barely more than steam. He didn't answer immediately. His jaw clenched. A vein twitched along his throat as lightning lit him from behind, outlining him like a myth carved against the storm. A stranger. And yet, my heart thrummed like it had been waiting for him, foolishly, against every thread of sense. You shouldn't be here, he said finally. His voice was deep, dangerously calm, like river water hiding a current strong enough to kill. I blinked. Rain from my lashes. Neither should you. Last I checked, the woods at midnight aren't meant for. I swallowed around the fear sharpening my tongue. Giant black wolves. His lips curved, not a smile, but the faintest flicker of something sharp on his face. You saw too much. The bluntness chilled my blood. Saw too much? I repeated, trying hard to lace my voice with defiance instead of shaking. I nearly died of a heart attack, thanks. The least you can do is explain why the hell you are. Stop. The word wasn't shouted, but it was powerful. Command dripped from it, as though he was used to being obeyed. The sound coiled around my spine and made my knees want to bend in ways I resented. My chest heaved with fury at myself for freezing, for trembling, and most of all for answering some unspoken leash in his tone. I dragged my jacket tighter, glaring at him. You don't get to order me around. You scare the life out of me, and now I'm stranded in the middle of nowhere, so either you tell me who you are, or I keep walking. His head tilted just slightly, studying me with those dangerous ember eyes. You'd last 10 minutes. I hated the certainty in his voice, like I was already marked prey in some game. Maybe that's still 10 more than I want to spend standing here. For one heartbeat, I thought he might lunge toward me, away from me. I didn't know. Instead, he stepped back. The rain hazed between us, but I finally saw the exhaustion under his composure. His body trembled faintly, as though it had burned itself alive in the shift I'd witnessed. He looked powerful, yes, but scarred beneath it, haunted even. Where were you headed? He asked, quieter this time. I hesitated. My instincts screamed not to hand him a single truth. And yet, there was something about his gaze, even layered with danger, that demanded honesty. There's supposed to be a town, I muttered. 10 miles or so down this road. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. Pity? Alarm? Possessiveness? You won't make it on foot in this storm. A humorless bark of laughter escaped me. Well, my car disagrees. She gave up right back there. So unless you've got a tow truck hidden in those trees. For the first time, a rough sound cracked from his throat, almost a laugh. Low, broken, unused, but real. I don't, he said. What I do have is shelter. My brows shot up. Shelter, I echoed warily. That sounds about 3 steps away from serial killer's cabin. His mouth twitched again, this time darker. If I wanted you dead, do you really think you'd still be standing? The bluntness of his logic hollowed my chest of retorts. The storm screamed louder around us, as if punctuating his words. My teeth chattered as I took in the mud pulling at my boots, the lightning splitting overhead, the way his eyes refused to soften. Maybe walking 10 miles into thunder and wolves was worse than following a stranger who was somehow both. Still, caution rasped from me. And what exactly am I supposed to call my rescuer then? You can't expect me to just follow a man who turns into a monster without so much as a name. Something unreadable passed across his face. Hurt, rage, or simply restraint. He watched me for a long time before offering one simple answer. Kale. The name settled strangely against the storm, old, heavy, as if it had carried centuries in its syllables. I whispered it back before I could stop myself. Kale. His eyes sharpened at hearing it on my lips. Then he turned, tossing one brief command over his shoulder. Stay close. I should have refused. I should have bolted, screaming into the lightning. But something bound me in place. The storm, the hunger in his gaze, the curiosity clawing my ribs apart. Against reason, I followed. Branches clawed at my jacket as we moved off the gravel road, deeper into trees that looked older than time. His strides were long, predatory despite his human form, mine clumsy in the mud. But whenever I stumbled, his head whipped back, watching, waiting. As though the forest itself answered to his awareness, nothing moved around us without his eyes checking to assure my safety. It should have scared me more than it did. Rain trickled colder through my clothes, down my spine, and I shook until my teeth bit my lip. But with every step, my brain whispered the same traitorous thought. Something about him was safer than the storm. We emerged into a small clearing, a cabin hunched among the trees, roof bowed beneath the tempest, smoke curling faintly from a battered chimney. Kale held the door as thunder split the sky again. His gaze pinned me hard, dangerous. No questions. For tonight, you stay. Understand? I wanted to demand answers, to claw truth from him until I bled. Instead, the words that slipped out were nothing but a rasp of surrender. Yes. His shoulders slackened just a fraction, and the storm swallowed the silence as I stepped inside. Fate had just shifted whether into salvation or curse. I didn't know, but I had crossed the threshold. And there was no way back. A Werewolf romance audiobook. Section 3. Eyes in the dark. The cabin groaned as we entered, as though it could feel the storm pressing against it. Wind slammed the shutters, rattling them like angry fists, and the roof shook under the pounding rain. It was the kind of place horror movies warned you never to step into. Isolated, ancient wood, the faint scent of smoke and damp earth hanging in the air. But compared to the forest outside, it felt like a fragile shield. Heat from a fire licked across my frozen skin, carrying the sharp tang of burned pine. A single flame sputtered in the stone hearth, as if raging against the storm's moaning wind. Shadows stretched long across the cabin's bare interior, and they stretched unnaturally. It was the way my eyes kept catching movement where nothing moved, shapes that bent differently depending on the way Kale stood in front of them. I pretended not to notice. Fear stitched itself tight across my lips. You're soaked, he said, his voice low, even. He'd crossed the space toward a battered wooden chest, retrieving an old flannel blanket. The gesture almost seemed domestic if you could ignore the fact that not 30 minutes ago, this same man had been a snarling beast with eyes that weren't human. He set the blanket into my hands without waiting for my thanks, his fingers brushing mine only briefly. Too warm, almost burning. I wrapped the fabric around myself, still glaring at him over the edge. What exactly is this? A cabin in the middle of nowhere? You live here? His gaze cut to me, sharp enough that my stomach tightened. For now, that's not an answer. He said nothing further. Instead, he crouched by the fire, coaxing the weak flame into something stronger. My eyes traced the curve of his shoulders beneath the soaked remnants of his shirt, muscles twitching and flexing with every small movement. His back was mapped with pale scars, long, jagged like claw marks carved into him by more than one battle. An ache fluttered deep in my chest before I could stop it. Pain recognized pain. It didn't matter how monstrous the source might be. My voice was quieter when it escaped me. What happened to you? Lightning spilled through the warped glass of a window and washed over him as he looked up. His ember eyes snagged mine, and the silence between us bristled alive. You don't want to know, he said finally, tone flat. Maybe I do. I shot back. Something flickered in his eyes, faint sorrow, quickly buried under a wall of steel. He turned back to the fire, as if my words hadn't deserved a real reply. That hollow ache in me wrestled with a sharper instinct. Suspicion. He wasn't just a stranger. He was a liar, hiding everything behind clenched jaws and silence. No scars like that came from anything ordinary, and no man shifted into something that belonged in folklore. A log cracked inside the fire, drawing me out of my thoughts. My damp hair clung in strands around my face as I studied the small cabin more closely. Sparse but lived in. A bed pressed against the corner wall, sheets tangled like they'd been abandoned in haste. Shelves stacked with jars of dried herbs, none labeled, all smelling faintly of iron and bitter smoke. A weapon rested against the far wall, a broad hunting knife, its blade catching the firelight with a glimmer too clean for how remote this place seemed, and something else, on a narrow wooden table, tucked almost carelessly into a pile of cloth, sat a silver chain with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. My skin prickled as I stared at it. The piece pulsed with some strange pull, as though my gaze was being dragged to it, tethered to it. I turned back to Kale. "You're not normal." He didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. Only smirked faintly, bitter as smoke. "Neither are you, if you can see that." The words slid a chill through me. "See what?" He straightened from the fire, slow, full height unfolding, shadow swallowing half his face. "The way the chain glows. No ordinary eyes catch that, human." For the first time, a rough sound cracked from his throat, almost a laugh. Low, broken, unused but real. "I don't," he said. "What I do have is shelter." My brows shot up. "Shelter?" I echoed warily. "That sounds about 3 steps away from serial killer's cabin." His mouth twitched again, this time darker. "If I wanted you dead, do you really think you'd still be standing?" The bluntness of his logic hollowed my chest of retorts. The storm screamed louder around us, as if punctuating his words. My teeth chattered as I took in the mud pulling at my boots, the lightning splitting overhead, the way his eyes refused to soften. Maybe walking 10 miles into thunder and wolves was worse than following a stranger who was somehow both. Still, caution rasped from me. And what exactly am I supposed to call my rescuer then? "You can't expect me to just follow a man who turns into a monster without so much as a name." Something unreadable passed across his face. Hurt, rage, or simply restraint. He watched me for a long time before offering one simple answer. "Kale." The name settled strangely against the storm. Old, heavy, as if it had carried centuries in its syllables. I whispered it back before I could stop myself. "Kale." His eyes sharpened at hearing it on my lips. Then he turned, tossing one brief command over his shoulder. "Stay close." I should have refused. I should have bolted, screaming into the lightning. But something bound me in place, the storm, the hunger in his gaze, the curiosity clawing my ribs apart. Against reason, I followed. Branches clawed at my jacket as we moved off the gravel road, deeper into trees that looked older than time. His strides were long, predatory despite his human form. Mine clumsy in the mud. But whenever I stumbled, his head whipped back, watching, waiting. As though the forest itself answered to his awareness. Nothing moved around us without his eyes checking to assure my safety. It should have scared me more than it did. Rain trickled colder through my clothes, down my spine, and I shook until my teeth bit my lip. But with every step, my brain whispered the same traitorous thought. Something about him was safer than the storm. We emerged into a small clearing, a cabin hunched among the trees, roof bowed beneath the tempest, smoke curling faintly from a battered chimney. Kale held the door as thunder split the sky again. His gaze pinned me hard, dangerous. "No questions. For tonight, you stay. Understand?" I wanted to demand answers, to claw truth from him until I bled. Instead, the words that slipped out were nothing but a rasp of surrender. Yes. His shoulders slackened just a fraction, and the storm swallowed the silence as I stepped inside. Fate had just shifted, whether into salvation or curse, I didn't know. But I had crossed the threshold. And there was no way back. A Werewolf romance audiobook, Section 3. Eyes in the dark. The cabin groaned as we entered, as though it could feel the storm pressing against it. Wind slammed the shutters, rattling them like angry fists, and the roof shook under the pounding rain. It was the kind of place horror movies warned you never to step into. Isolated, ancient wood, the faint scent of smoke and damp earth hanging in the air. But compared to the forest outside, it felt like a fragile shield. Heat from a fire licked across my frozen skin, carrying the sharp tang of burned pine. A single flame sputtered in the stone hearth, as if raging against the storm's moaning wind. Shadows stretched long across the cabin's bare interior, and they stretched unnaturally. It was the way my eyes kept catching movement where nothing moved, shapes that bent differently depending on the way Kale stood in front of them. I pretended not to notice. Fear stitched itself tight across my lips. "You're soaked," he said, his voice low, even. He'd crossed the space toward a battered wooden chest, retrieving an old flannel blanket. The gesture almost seemed domestic if you could ignore the fact that not 30 minutes ago, this same man had been a snarling beast with eyes that weren't human. He set the blanket into my hands without waiting for my thanks, his fingers brushing mine only briefly. Too warm, almost burning. I wrapped the fabric around myself, still glaring at him over the edge. What exactly is this? A cabin in the middle of nowhere? You live here? His gaze cut to me, sharp enough that my stomach tightened. For now, that's not an answer. He said nothing further. Instead, he crouched by the fire, coaxing the weak flame into something stronger. My eyes traced the curve of his shoulders beneath the soaked remnants of his shirt, muscles twitching and flexing with every small movement. His back was mapped with pale scars, long, jagged like claw marks carved into him by more than one battle. An ache fluttered deep in my chest before I could stop it. Pain recognized pain. It didn't matter how monstrous the source might be. My voice was quieter when it escaped me. What happened to you? Lightning spilled through the warped glass of a window and washed over him as he looked up. His ember eyes snagged mine, and the silence between us bristled alive. You don't want to know, he said finally, tone flat. Maybe I do. I shot back. Something flickered in his eyes, faint sorrow, quickly buried under a wall of steel. He turned back to the fire, as if my words hadn't deserved a real reply. That hollow ache in me wrestled with a sharper instinct. Suspicion. He wasn't just a stranger. He was a liar, hiding everything behind clenched jaws and silence. No scars like that came from anything ordinary, and no man shifted into something that belonged in folklore. A log cracked inside the fire, drawing me out of my thoughts. My damp hair clung in strands around my face as I studied the small cabin more closely. Sparse but lived in. A bed pressed against the corner wall, sheets tangled like they'd been abandoned in haste. Shelves stacked with jars of dried herbs, none labeled, all smelling faintly of iron and bitter smoke. A weapon rested against the far wall, a broad hunting knife, its blade catching the firelight with a glimmer to clean for how remote this place seemed. And something else, on a narrow wooden table, tucked almost carelessly into a pile of cloth, sat a silver chain with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. My skin prickled as I stared at it. The piece pulsed with some strange pull, as though my gaze was being dragged to it, tethered to it. I turned back to Cale. You're not normal. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. Only smirked faintly, bitter as smoke. Neither are you, if you can see that. The words slid a chill through me. See what? He straightened from the fire, slow, full height unfolding, shadow swallowing half his face. The way the chain glows. No ordinary eyes catch that, human. For the first time, a rough sound cracked from his throat, almost a laugh. Low, broken, unused but real. I don't, he said. What I do have is shelter. My brows shot up. Shelter, I echoed warily. That sounds about 3 steps away from serial killer's cabin. His mouth twitched again, this time darker. If I wanted you dead, do you really think you'd still be standing? The bluntness of his logic hollowed my chest of retorts. The storm screamed louder around us, as if punctuating his words. My teeth chattered as I took in the mud pulling at my boots, the lightning splitting overhead, the way his eyes refused to soften. Maybe walking 10 miles into thunder and wolves was worse than following a stranger who was somehow both. Still, caution rasped from me. And what exactly am I supposed to call my rescuer then? You can't expect me to just follow a man who turns into a monster without so much as a name. Something unreadable passed across his face. Hurt, rage, or simply restraint. He watched me for a long time before offering one simple answer. Cale. The name settled strangely against the storm. Old, heavy, as if it had carried centuries in its syllables. I whispered it back before I could stop myself. Cale. His eyes sharpened at hearing it on my lips. Then he turned, tossing one brief command over his shoulder. Stay close. I should have refused. I should have bolted, screaming into the lightning. But something bound me in place. The storm, the hunger in his gaze, the curiosity clawing my ribs apart. Against reason, I followed. Branches clawed at my jacket as we moved off the gravel road, deeper into trees that looked older than time. His strides were long, predatory despite his human form. Mine clumsy in the mud. But whenever I stumbled, his head whipped back, watching, waiting. As though the forest itself answered to his awareness. Nothing moved around us without his eyes checking to assure my safety. It should have scared me more than it did. Rain trickled colder through my clothes, down my spine, and I shook until my teeth bit my lip. But with every step, my brain whispered the same traitorous thought. Something about him was safer than the storm. We emerged into a small clearing, a cabin hunched among the trees, roof bowed beneath the tempest, smoke curling faintly from a Battered chimney. Kale held the door as thunder split the sky again. His gaze pinned me hard, dangerous. No questions. For tonight, you stay. Understand? I wanted to demand answers, to claw truth from him until I bled. Instead, the words that slipped out were nothing but a rasp of surrender. Yes. His shoulders slackened just a fraction, and the storm swallowed the silence as I stepped inside. Fate had just shifted whether into salvation or curse. I didn't know, but I had crossed the threshold. And there was no way back. A Werewolf romance audiobook section 3. Eyes in the dark. The cabin groaned as we entered, as though it could feel the storm pressing against it. Wind slammed the shutters, rattling them like angry fists, and the roof shook under the pounding rain. It was the kind of place horror movies warned you never to step into. Isolated, ancient wood, the faint scent of smoke and damp earth hanging in the air. But compared to the forest outside, it felt like a fragile shield, heat from a fire licked across my frozen skin, carrying the sharp tang of burned pine. A single flame sputtered in the stone hearth, as if raging against the storm's moaning wind. Shadows stretched long across the cabin's bare interior, and they stretched unnaturally. It was the way my eyes kept catching movement where nothing moved, shapes that bent differently depending on the way Kale stood in front of them. I pretended not to notice. Fear stitched itself tight across my lips. You're soaked, he said, his voice low, even. He'd crossed the space toward a battered wooden chest, retrieving an old flannel blanket. The gesture almost seemed domestic if you could ignore the fact that not 30 minutes ago, this same man had been a snarling beast with eyes that weren't human. He set the blanket into my hands without waiting for my thanks, his fingers brushing mine only briefly. Too warm, almost burning. I wrapped the fabric around myself, still glaring at him over the edge. What exactly is this? A cabin in the middle of nowhere? You live here? His gaze cut to me, sharp enough that my stomach tightened. For now, that's not an answer. He said nothing further. Instead, he crouched by the fire, coaxing the weak flame into something stronger. My eyes traced the curve of his shoulders beneath the soaked remnants of his shirt, muscles twitching and flexing with every small movement. His back was mapped with pale scars, long, jagged like claw marks carved into him by more than one battle. An ache fluttered deep in my chest before I could stop it. Pain recognized pain. It didn't matter how monstrous the source might be. My voice was quieter when it escaped me. What happened to you? Lightning spilled through the warped glass of a window and washed over him as he looked up. His ember eyes snagged mine, and the silence between us bristled alive. You don't want to know, he said finally, tone flat. Maybe I do. I shot back. Something flickered in his eyes, faint sorrow, quickly buried under a wall of steel. He turned back to the fire, as if my words hadn't deserved a real reply. That hollow ache in me wrestled with a sharper instinct. Suspicion. He wasn't just a stranger. He was a liar, hiding everything behind clenched jaws and silence. No scars like that came from anything ordinary, and no man shifted into something that belonged in folklore. A log cracked inside the fire, drawing me out of my thoughts. My damp hair clung in strands around my face as I studied the small cabin more closely. Sparse but lived in. A bed pressed against the corner wall, sheets tangled like they'd been abandoned in haste. Shelves stacked with jars of dried herbs, none labeled, all smelling faintly of iron and bitter smoke. A weapon rested against the far wall, a broad hunting knife, its blade catching the firelight with a glimmer to clean for how remote this place seemed. And something else, on a narrow wooden table, tucked almost carelessly into a pile of cloth, sat a silver chain with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. My skin prickled as I stared at it. The piece pulsed with some strange pull, as though my gaze was being dragged to it, tethered to it. I turned back to Kale. You're not normal. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. Only smirked faintly, bitter as smoke. Neither are you. If you can see that. The words slid a chill through me. See what? He straightened from the fire, slow, full height unfolding, shadow swallowing half his face. The way the chain glows. No ordinary eyes catch that, human. The air reeked sharp iron, smoke, something burning. My hand throbbed with heat, skin screaming, but still I clutched the chain like a lifeline. Behind me, the black wolf roared, thrashing, every muscle an avalanche as he shredded through his opponent. The pale beast slashed once across his side, but Kale didn't falter. His jaws closed around its throat. Crunch. The body collapsed and didn't move again. I dropped the glowing pendant, breath ripping out of me, chest clawing for air as if I'd run 10 miles. The wolf beside me turned Kale, massive, towering, panting hard. His fur gleamed obsidian black, streaked with blood, rain, and firelight. His molten eyes found me, recognition, possession, and worse, something that wasn't quite human love, but wasn't hunger either. Something terrifyingly in between. I backed against the wall, throat tight, not sure if I'd just saved him or declared myself his. The storm wailed on outside, but in my bones, I knew the real storm had only just begun. A werewolf romance audiobook section. 6 Blood and Oaths. Cabin stank of blood and rain. Smoke drifted low from the hearth, tangled with the copper tang of something darker. My ears still rang from the snarls, from the crunch of bone and the unholy silence that followed. It was as if the storm itself had muted, stealing breath out of the night to listen to us. Kale stood over the fallen body of the pale wolf, chest heaving. His black fur gleamed wet, streaked where crimson had smeared into it. The sight stole whatever air I thought I'd regained. He was magnificent and horrifying, an embodiment of violence wrapped in muscle and shadow and fire. And then, in a ripple of cracks and groans that made my stomach twist, he changed back, the black fur sloughed into skin, claws to fingers, teeth receding with an animal snarl still clinging to his mouth. A moment later he crouched naked before the corpse, body shuddering, sweat and rain dripping off him. His back split with painful scars, old ones blending now with fresh, bleeding gashes. Clawed across his side, I swallowed bile. Horror gripped my spine, but another current threaded beneath it too, something humiliatingly different. Hunger, need. He looked carved by gods, broken and brutal but sculpted with such feral grace that my gaze clung to him against my will. His burning eyes flicked up and caught me staring. I jerked my face away, clutching the blanket around me tighter. My chest ached with a heat I couldn't name. Are you hurt? His voice was shredded raw gravel mixing with the last edges of the wolf still clinging to him. No, I don't think so. My hand throbbed, and only then did I remember. The pendant I'd dropped. It lay near the hearth, silver moon glimmering faint, like it remembered its glow from earlier. Kale followed my gaze. In an instant he was moving, snatching the pendant up in his blood-slick fingers and snarling as if it had tried to bite him. That, he spat, should not be in your hands. I stepped back, every muscle stiffening. It saved me, saved us. That wolf was going to kill me, and when you could have burned yourself alive. He slammed the pendant onto the table with a force that rattled its legs. His chest rose and fell harder, eyes wild, flames twitching inside them. I glared at him, anger finally shoving my fear aside. Then maybe tell me why. Tell me what's going on instead of treating me like an idiot who shouldn't see too much. Explain, Kale, because I'm not going to keep pretending this is normal. Silence dropped sharp. He braced both hands on the table, head bowed. For a long breath, only the storm answered. When he finally spoke, the words came rough as stone. They were shades. The name itself dragged something cold down my bones. I didn't know what it meant, but the way he said it, like curse, like venom, made my skin crawl. They weren't like you. I murmured. No, not like me. His voice lowered, bitter. Worse. Rogues. Lost to hunger. I hugged the blanket, fingernails digging into my own shoulders. Why were they after me? Kale's head lifted. His gaze seared, anger and conflict strung tight inside it. Because of the pendant, because of what you are. My heart stopped. What I am. I'm human, he said quickly, almost too quickly. A lie. His tone betrayed it. Human enough, but you shouldn't have seen it glow. Why did it? Why could I see it when you said no one human could? Every word echoed through the cabin too loud, threading with thunder. Kale's mouth pressed into a hard line. Because fate is cruel. The answer tasted like smoke and half-truths. It wasn't enough. My chest burned with fury, grief, confusion. Stop saying that. Stop hiding. You dragged me into this. And I deserve? His voice cut the wolf still in it, low and violent and dangerous. But then his shoulders caved, and he turned away, palms flat against the wooden wall as if he could steady himself on it. You deserve better than to be hunted by creatures who won't stop until you bleed. Better than being trapped with a monster like me. The last words whispered raw, but they tore through me sharper than a shout. He faced me then, eyes dimmer, softer, smoldering with something broken. The violent edge melted into sorrow, weight so old I couldn't name it. Kale. My voice cracked. I didn't know what I meant to say. He crossed the floor and stopped too close, blood still streaking his chest, warmth radiating from his skin. His towering shadow swallowed mine against the wall. He leaned in, not close enough to touch, but closer than safe, and whispered, "Swear to me. Swear you will not leave this cabin tonight. Swear you'll trust me even when you think you shouldn't. I can't keep you alive otherwise." My breath caught. This sounds a lot like a prison, not protection. His hand lifted before stopping midair, curling into a fist as if restraining itself. It's not a prison. It's an oath. My oath. Blood has been spilled, and that binds me, whether I want it or not. From tonight forward, your life is mine to guard until fate decides otherwise. The words vibrated against the storm, heavier than promise, closer to curse. I should have refused, should have screamed, but his eyes burned into mine, every word soaked in something fierce and unshakable. Protector and predator, curse and salvation, and against everything sane in my body, the only whisper that left my lips was, "I swear." His chest rose, sharp, taut, as though that vow had wounded him deeper than the claw marks still bleeding across his side. For a long, aching silence, he only stared. Then he turned away, throwing himself back into the role of shielding shadow by the door. I collapsed into the chair again, clutching the blanket, heart thundering. Fate had just bound me to him. And whether Kale was my guardian or my curse, I could no longer tell. He was my protector. Until he became my curse. A Werewolf romance audiobook section. 7. The Hunt Begins. Dawn never came, or maybe it did, and the storm had swallowed it whole. All I knew was that when my eyes finally fluttered open after restless sleep, the sky outside the warped glass was still black. The kind of black that felt thick, like ink clouding water. The fire had died. The cabin breathed only smoke. Kale wasn't by the door anymore. I jolted upright, the blanket spilling from my shoulders. Panic curled sharp in my chest before I found him at the window, nothing more than a tall shadow, scarred shoulders rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. "You should have kept sleeping," he said, voice heavy. Without turning, a shiver licked my spine. "You sound like we don't have time to sleep." "No, we don't." He finally turned, and in his eyes I saw no trace of the ember glow from last night. Only exhaustion, worse, dread, like a man caught in a battle already lost. The pendant glimmered faint on the table between us, like a drop of moonlight. Its glow unsettled me more now than it had the night before. "The shades?" I asked, knowing the answer. "They'll come again." "How soon?" Kale's jaw clenched. His silence was answer enough. The storm groaned louder, shaking the beams of the cabin, but beneath thunder's growl, another sound clawed against my ears. Low, alien, a chorus of howls rolling through the forest, carried through the rain. Not one, dozens. My blood iced. "They're calling each other." "Yes," Kale rasped. His hand slammed against the window frame as though steadying the whole cabin with his strength. "They hunt in packs, and they've scented blood." I wrapped my arms tighter, staring at the smolder of the pendant. "Mine?" "No, mine." I looked up sharply, catching him in that rare moment of honesty, bare, violent, human. His body carried scars, fresh wounds leaking beneath the cloth, hastily tied around his side, scent of iron sharp in the room. The hunter was bleeding, which made him prey. A silence stretched taut between us until I found my voice. "Then we run." His eyes snapped to me, surprised, then a harsh laugh escaped, grim as breaking glass. "You wouldn't last an hour. You keep saying that." I shot back, anger kindling in my fear. "But I'm not some porcelain doll. If you're bleeding, if they're after you, then sitting here waiting for death isn't an option." Kale stepped forward. His sheer presence swallowed the space between us, his ember gaze brightening again with the storm's rhythm. He looked down at me, fire smoldering beneath restraint. "You don't understand." His voice cut deep, guttural. "If they take you," he broke off, throat tensing as if the words themselves could tear him apart. "If they take you," he forced through clenched teeth, "it won't be quick." I went still, his meaning sinking like stone into my gut. "Then don't let them." It was reckless, defiant, but the tremor in my voice betrayed the terror clawing through me. Kale's mouth twisted like he wanted to argue, wanted to warn me again, but another sound outside stole both our breaths. Wood cracked in the trees. Heavy, deliberate, closer. "They've found the clearing," Kale growled. His head snapped toward the table. In 2 strides, he scooped up the pendant and shoved it hard into my hand, his skin burning against mine. I flinched. "You said I shouldn't, don't argue," he snarled. His eyes blazed, molten fire swallowing the human away. It answers to you. That's all the reason we have. My chest hammered. Kale, his body rippled, shuddering skin trembling as though it could barely contain the wolf within anymore. When we go out there, he rasped, don't run, don't scream, stay at my back. And if there's no if, he snapped. His hand caught my chin before I could pull away, tilting my face up to his. For the first time, his touch wasn't just hot, it was almost tender. Scorched tenderness, buried in all that fury. I swore your life was mine to guard. I intend to keep that oath, even if it kills me. My throat closed. His vow seared deeper than the storm's chill, carved sharp and strange into places of me I thought long dead. Before I could answer, the door rattled against another blow. Splinters cracked. Shadows slid along the walls where the fire had burned out. The shades were here. Kale shoved me behind him, every line of his body elongating, stretching, splitting into something half human, half beast. The change was faster this time, smoother, as though rage greased the transformation. One breath, he towered as a man. The next, he was the wolf again, black fur streaming, jaws dripping, growl deep as earth. The door tore open, 4 of them spilled. Inside, pale wolves with dripping jaws, silver eyes gleaming, bodies leaner but swift. The first lunged, claws scraping wood. Kale met it midair, their collision cracking beams overhead. The cabin shook with snarls and snapping bones. Another wolf slunk low toward me. My hand lifted the pendant before my mind had even ordered it. It hissed to life, light blooming, fierce, stabbing the shade backward as it howled, blinded. My palm burned, nerves screaming, but the glow held. Get back, I shouted, though my voice nearly ripped apart. The wolf recoiled, but 2 more circled in snarls echoing under the roof like demons. Kale roared, ripping one to the ground in a spray of gore. His blood hit the floorboards hot and fast. The strongest predator I'd ever seen, and even he staggered under their sheer number. I clutched the pendant tighter, its glow painting the cabin silver. The wolf nearest me faltered, but its gaze, those inhuman silver eyes, latched to mine like it could see through the jewel, to my heartbeat, my soul, and deep inside, something shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore, not only human terror. Something older stirred with the pendant's heat, answering the darkness staring me down. My breath caught. For the briefest flicker, before Kale's black shape lunged between us, I swore I heard a voice, not mine, not his, curling through my skull like an echo from the pendant itself. You're not prey. Then Kale's jaws closed around the shade's neck, tearing through the night like thunder. Blood sprayed. The cabin shook. The storm howled with the sound of the hunt truly beginning, and I realized, clutching the glowing pendant with trembling hands, that I wasn't just caught in this world by accident. The hunt wasn't only for Kale anymore. It was for me. The cabin reeked of blood and rain, the floor slick with it, black stains spreading across the warped boards. The fire had long died, leaving the room draped in half shadow. Silence pressed down, thick and iron hot. 4 corpses lay still on the floor, gleaming eyes faded into the dullness of death. But Kale was still on his feet, barely. He wavered where he stood, half shifted still, ribs torn open along his side, blood dripping down his arm. His chest heaved with breaths like broken thunder, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked fragile. Not weak. Kale would never be weak, but fragile, the way cliffs are after centuries of storms. And then, in a pained snarl, the wolf form collapsed in on itself. Fur collapsed back into muscle, claws retracted to hands. His cry rattled stone and bone as he hit his knees, human again, blood flowing freer than before. Kale, I lunged forward, catching his shoulders. As his weight dropped, the heat of him nearly seared my palms, his skin molten as though transformation left fire beneath it. You shouldn't, he gasped, jaw clenching, sweat dripping off his temple. You shouldn't touch me. Too late, I snapped, dragging his weight toward the bed against the cabin wall. He resisted at first, muscles rigid with some wild pride, but weakness finally betrayed him. He slumped where I pulled him, collapsing onto the tangled sheets. I knelt beside him, my blanket forgotten somewhere near the destroyed door. His blood smeared my arms, thick and hot. My heart pounded against ribs too narrow to contain it. You're bleeding out. I've bled worse, even near unconscious. His voice held that stubborn rasp, the steel that refused pity. I glared down at him, fury burning hotter than fear. Stop pretending you're invincible. You might heal, but you're still going to die if we let you flood this room with your pride. His lips twitched, maybe mockery, maybe pain. Fierce little human. I bit my tongue. My hands pressed against the thick gash across his ribs, and he arched with a shuddering growl at the contact. My fingers felt the tremor of muscle fighting. Me, fighting itself. Hold still, I told him. Unless you want me to make things worse. He went still. Too still, as though holding himself in check required every shred of strength left in him. My gaze lingered over scars, so many scars. His chest, his back, his arms. It wasn't just old battles carved over him. It was survival. His whole body was a story written in torn flesh and ink black will. I whispered without meaning to. How can one body take so much? His eyes cracked open, molten even in exhaustion, and found mine. Because it has to. He dragged a slow breath, grimacing, as my hand pressed harder against the wound. Because no one else will. That hushed the storm in my head more than the silence outside did. My throat closed. I wanted to ask who else, Kale? What else have you lost? But the words tangled against my tongue. Instead, I reached for the ragged cloth hanging from the windowsill and ripped it into strips. The motion felt mechanical, fueled by panic. My shaking hands tied bandages tight across his side. He hissed between teeth. You've done this before. The words froze me. What? Tended. People. Wounds. Not the first time blood covered your hands. Images rose sharp and fast in my mind. Aaron drunk at the edge of a fight. The night I'd patched him up through gritted teeth before he left me for someone easier to love. I shoved the memory away as fast as it came. I learned quickly. I said stiffly. Kale didn't push. His gaze flicked toward the table, where the silver pendant still lay. Its faint light glimmered against us, pale moon carved into its surface. It shouldn't respond to you, he said. His voice was lower now, the rasp of exhaustion stripping away his command, leaving something nearer truth. Yet it does. I tied another knot at his ribs, pulling harder than necessary. He winced, then laughed, low and rough, without joy. Defiant. His eyes slid shut, breaths heavy. Maybe fate knew what it was doing, after all. I froze. Kale, why me? Why did it glow for me? I'm no one. You're not no one. His lips parted, and the weight in his voice pressed me still. You carry the mark of the moon whether you know it or not. The words slashed through me, stranger than any knife. The mark of the. He cut me off, eyes opening again, and for one suspended breath, something softer than fire lived there. Tenderness, fear, desire fighting against itself. You're changing, he whispered. I can hear it, smell it. Whatever you were before, you'll never be just that again. The pendant pulsed as if answering him, throwing a faint light that swelled and dimmed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The chains whispered against the wood, faint music too subtle for the storm to drown out. Fear tightened my chest, fear that wasn't only mine. Something deep and old stirred inside, a part of me answering a call I'd never heard before tonight. My hand inched toward the glowing silver, trembling. Kale's arm shot out, his bloody hand clamping around my wrist. His grip was brutal, fire seeping through my skin to bone. Don't, he ground out. Not yet. You don't know what it'll do. I deserve to know. His eyes narrowed, fire snapping hard in them again. No softness now. You deserve to live. Tonight, that's the only answer I can give you. The storm outside growled louder, as though agreeing or mocking. Lightning flared through the glass, illuminating the scarred man gripping me, the protector bound by blood and oath, the beast wrapped in shadow, the curse I'd called beautiful. In a moment of fear, and the pendant lay between us, still pulsing, still whispering secrets into the marrow of my bones. I couldn't tell if it was warning me away or calling me closer. The storm hadn't passed, when dawn finally should have broken. All it brought was deeper shadow, an unnatural black stretched across the treetops. The smell of rain and rot clung to the walls of the cabin like a curse, soaked into old wood and my hair, refusing to release me. I sat stiff near the dying fire, every nerve alive, watching Kale pace the debris. He didn't limp, though his side was still bloodied under the bandages I'd wrapped. His body moved with predator's ease, stalking the narrow cabin like a caged animal. His eyes gleamed faintly even in the dark. They'll return, he muttered, more to himself than to me, not just a scouting pack. They'll call a host next time. The word coiled tight in my gut. A host? Kale stopped pacing. His gaze slashed over me, fire and steel. Too many for me to hold, too many for you to survive. The pendant on the table pulsed once steady, rhythmic as if it agreed. I stood, heart pounding my throat. Then we run. He faced me fully. At that, head tilting slightly like he hadn't expected me to say it twice. His jaw worked, tight, unreadable. You'd slow me down. And you're bleeding, I said sharply. We'll slow each other down. That doesn't change the fact that if we stay here, we die. His nostrils flared, shoulders tense beneath dried streaks of blood. Finally, like a great weight dragged out of him, he gave a single nod. Then we move. He crossed to the table, snatched up the pendant, and pressed it back into my hand. This time, he didn't fight its reaction, the faint burn, the glow that rose against my skin. His fingers lingered over mine, too warm, too hard. Don't let it go. No matter what happens. My chest squeezed. I don't even know what it is. You will. His eyes pulled into mine, searing. Soon. The wind rattled the broken door. Shadows stretched long across the floorboards. Without another word, Cale turned and pushed through what was left of the frame, slipping into the storm-slung forest. I followed, the woods pressed heavy, trunks rising like black pillars into a ceiling of seething clouds. Rain slicked the underbrush. Mud, sucking at my boots. Branches clutched at my sleeves as though trying to hold me back. Cale moved swift ahead of me, a shadow woven from speed and muscle and hunger. He paused often, head lifting, nostrils flaring, the wolf in him listening to dangers I couldn't. Sometimes he doubled back, placing his body too close to mine, guiding me over roots, over slick stone, one hand firm against my back as if it were instinct. The forest noises were wrong, too quiet, every sound smothered under the storm, until the first halt carried far across the trees, high and sharp, answered by another, and another. Cale's jaw flexed, his profile grim in the stormlight. As he muttered, "They've scented us," my stomach turned, ice rushing my veins. How many? He didn't answer. Which was the worst answer of all. We cut deeper into the forest, down a ravine slick with rain. My lungs burned, legs raw as each step sank into mud. Cale slowed when my breath faltered, though impatience flickered across his scarred face. "Don't stop," he growled. "If you stop, they'll close in." "I'm trying," I gasped. His gaze snapped to my hand gripping the glowing pendant. Its light shimmered faint in rhythm with my ragged breaths. Something unreadable flashed in his eyes, fear, or both. "You're waking it," he said, voice rough. "I'm what?" Before he could answer, the forest snarled to life. A shape crashed through the trees to our left, white-furred, silver-eyed, jaws wide with hunger. Another broke from the right. "Stay behind me," Cale roared. I froze as he leapt forward, half shifting mid-stride, tearing into the first wolf with claws erupting from his hands. The sound of breaking bone cracked across the trees. The second wolf veered toward me instead, charging with teeth bared. The pendant flared, heat seared down my arm, burning bright through every nerve. I screamed, raising it like some pathetic shield, but the light ripped outward, blinding, silver fire flooding the ravine. The shade howled, slamming back as if struck. Cale spun, dragging its body to the ground, snapping through its throat. His fangs dripped black blood in the rain. I staggered, my chest twisting with the aftershock, the pendant pulsing hot, nearly molten. Cale's blazing eyes cut to me. "I told you not to much." He looked like he might tear the thing from my hand, but he didn't touch me. He only panted hard, gaze caught on the pendant's stubborn glow. "It could burn you from the inside before you even know what you are." Words tangled in my throat. "Then what am I?" His gaze softened at the edges for once. No fire, no anger, only sorrow. Moon-marked, the storm shook the trees, a hush spreading just long enough to make the night feel unreal. I couldn't breathe. "That's not what does that mean?" He stepped closer, towering, his heat wrapping around me through rain and night. His hand rose again, hesitating between wanting to touch my face or drag the pendant away. Both instincts warred in his eyes. "It means nothing will ever see you as human again." Before I could speak, a chorus of howls split the air. Not two, not four, too many. The forest lit with silver eyes, dozens blinking in unison, circling the ravine from above. Cale spun, his body shaking with the shift rippling under his skin. He bared his teeth, molten gaze igniting, and roared. "They've claimed the hunt." The pendant flared against my palm. The shades poured down the slope, and somewhere in my blood, something began to answer them back. He was my protector. Until he became my curse. A werewolf romance audiobook section. 10 Moon Mark had the forest burned silver. Dozens of eyes crawled across the slopes above the ravine, piercing through the storm. Each shade's gleaming gaze locked on the two of us, their bodies ghost pale in snatches of lightning. their howls braided together, sharp enough to slice bone. Kale stood in front of me, already half-shifted, skin torn with seams of fur and molten eyes glowing bright enough to answer their silver. His chest heaved with a predator's rhythm. He wasn't only ready to fight, he was craving it. But even I knew this wasn't a fight anyone could win. The pendant pulsed in my hand again, burning my palm red. My heartbeat stuttered to match it. The glow swelled until it spilled faint across the mud, silver light cutting a circle around me. Kale snapped his head back, eyes locking on it, then on me. "Stop," he growled, voice ragged by the wolf. "It's calling them closer. I can't stop it." My chest burned. It's Kale. It's inside me. Something changed in his face then. Not disbelief, not confusion, recognition. The word he'd spoken earlier throbbed back at me like a wound, moon-marked. What does that even mean? I shouted, terror cutting my throat raw. Kale stepped closer, his towering body trembling with both restraint and fury. "It means you were. Never pray. Not to them. Not to me." The shades howled again, closing in. He seized my wrist, squeezing so hard I gasped, forcing the pendant tighter into my palm. His gaze pinned mine, flaming. "But if you don't learn to master it, that moon in your blood will draw everything damned in this forest straight to you, and they won't stop until you're devoured." I staggered back, horror twisting hot in my gut. "The moon in your blood? I don't understand. I'm human, no." Kale cut, voice guttural, shaking with the truth he'd tried to bury. Not only lightning ripped across the canopy, splitting the sky with a crack that rattled the air. With it came shadows, leaping silver wolves down the slope. Kale shoved me behind him, transformation shredding through him in a brutal rush. His black wolf burst forward, colliding with the first shade mid-attack, their bodies a whirlwind of blood and fur. Another lunge toward me, the pendant flared, silver light gushed outward again, but this time it didn't just drive the wolf back, it scorched it. The shade screamed as its fur caught light like paper burning. It twisted, snapping at the air, until Kale tore it down with jaws that crunched through spine. I stared at my hand, trembling, white-hot pain threading my bones where the pendant had seared into me, but the glow didn't fade. It fed, answering me. The other shades recoiled, circling warily. "What's happening to me?" My voice was ripped raw, too loud, as the words slipped out like prayer, like confession. Kale shifted his body between me and them again, blood and rain soaking his black fur. His eyes, those ember eyes, met mine once more. "You're claiming yourself," he said, words vibrating with a terrible reverence. Then he turned back to the circling wolves, snarling. For minutes, the forest became chaos. Kale fought in the thick of it, claws, jaws, raw violence. The black wolf was a nightmare of blood and thunder, tearing through rogues one by one. The world splintered into snarls and screams, into mud slick with rain and gore. I could barely breathe, barely think, but every time one of them came for me, the pendant answered, spilling light so harsh it seared their skin and sent them reeling. Sometimes I thought the pendant moved before I did, almost guiding me, as if some other will wove itself through me. "Not pray," the echo whispered again in the back of my mind. "Never pray." The tempo slowed. Ashen blood thickened under the storm. The shades began falling back, yelping and snarling, dragging bodies of their fallen into the trees. Their silver eyes retreated into the dark, still gleaming, but no longer charging. Kale stood tall in the mud, fur slick with gore and water, his molten eyes still bright, jaws dripping with battle. His growl rumbled low as thunder until silence smothered the forest again. Only then did he stagger. "Kale." I rushed forward, the pendant still pulsing against my palm, lighting the way to his side. He half shifted back, dropping to one knee, his chest rising ragged. His face was human again, but ruined with exhaustion, slashed with fresh blood across scarred skin. "They won't stop," he rasped. "Not until the claim is broken." I dropped to my knees beside him. "What claim?" His fiery eyes lifted, burning into mine even in weakness. "The hunt, the moon mark, you." I shook my head, fists clenching. Then make it stop. Take it back. Whatever this is, I don't want it." He grabbed my arm, jerking me closer. So fast I gasped. His bloody grip seared through me. "You think it's a choice?" His voice snarled, savage. "No, the moon doesn't give choices. It binds, it curses." His jaw trembled as he leaned closer, forehead nearly brushing mine. "And now it binds me to you." The words rocked through me harder than the storm. Bound, curse, moon. I felt it then, not through thought, but through the way the pendant pulsed against my chest, the heat dragging in sync with his heartbeat. My blood tripped faster, spilling, in a rhythm not my own. No, I whispered. What do you mean, bound? His lips pulled back, half snarl, half confession. Blood spilled, oath given, fate sealed. His hand tightened on me, fiercer, hotter, until it branded me inside out. You're mine now, and the hunt won't end until the moon itself takes you. The pendant blazed. The storm screamed, and something deep, foreign, terrifying, alive stirred awake inside me. We didn't stop running until the storm thinned into a mist and the earth rose into a jagged spine of rock. Cale found the cleft by instinct, pressed into the mountainside, and half hidden by thorn bramble. He shoved the brambles aside with a snarl, wincing as his hand came back torn. The air inside was damp, cold, smelling of mineral and moss. He motioned me through, his eyes molten in the dark. The cave's throat was narrow, stone scraped my shoulders, slick where rainwater had worn it smooth, but it opened wider a few steps into a hollow dome. Roots dangled from the ceiling like black ropes. Water dripped steadily into shallow puddles that reflected our jagged shadows. My breath echoed small, thin, behind us. The forest was too quiet. Even the storm seemed muted, as if the shades had swallowed the noise whole. That silence felt worse than their howls. Cale collapsed onto a flat rock at the edge of the hollow, his massive body folding like the strength had finally abandoned it. He was still half shifted, claws still curving at the tips of his fingers, fangs not fully recessed. Blood ran down his ribs in dark rivers, soaking through the bandages I'd wrapped hours ago in the cabin. You're bleeding again, I said, voice trembling. My knees found the stone floor almost without thought as I crouched before him. I'll heal, he rasped, as if reading from some ancient script. Automatic, dismissive. I shook my head. You say that every time, and yet you keep bleeding. My fingers brushed near his side. Heat radiated from him, enough to make my skin prickle. Even when wrecked, even when bleeding, Cale seemed to burn with something alive and terrible. He looked down at me then, ember eyes catching the faint light of dripping water, and his mouth twisted. Pain, humor, regret all tangled in one broken expression. You're stubborn, I learned from someone. For a moment, silence swallowed him. His throat clenched as if he wanted to retort, to push me away with teeth or scorn. Instead, he stayed still, every muscle rigid, while I pulled the cloth at his ribs free. The wound beneath was deep, tissue shredded, claw marks from something too sharp, too hungry. I caught my breath, my stomach knotting hard, but my hands didn't falter. I pressed the new strip of cloth tighter, ignoring the snarl it dragged out of him. How can one body take so much? I whispered. His chest rose hard, the sound more growl than breath. Fire seared in his eyes. Because it has to. Because no one else will. His words landed like stones inside me, breaking through defenses I didn't even realize I'd raised. You mean my voice broke? You've been fighting alone all this time. Something flickered across his face. Memory. Grief. He didn't confirm, but he didn't deny. The silence afterward was heavier than the cave itself. I tied the next bandage tight, my hands fumbling not from inexperience, but from what sat twisting. Hot in my chest. I wanted to look away. Couldn't. Every scar etched across Cale's body pressed a story into my bones. Loneliness. Duty. Violence so constant it had carved him hollow. And now me, tangled in it. His eyes cut sharp into mine again, holding me frozen. Why are you really here, Lena? The question sliced raw. Because you dragged me, no. He cut, low and fierce. Why stay? You've seen what I am. He bared his fangs, still too long, too sharp. What I'll always be. My throat locked. He was right. I should have already run 100 miles away. But the truth stuck stubborn in my chest, shameful. Because who else do I have? Because no one ever stayed for me either. I couldn't say it. Instead, I pressed harder at his wound. He hissed through teeth, claws gouging fresh lines into the stone he sat on. Yet he didn't throw me back. The wolf in him wanted to snap. The man in him stayed. Then sudden, sharp, his entire body tensed. His gaze locked on where my hand pressed to his ribs. His breath broke harsh. Do you feel that? His voice was strangled. Half growled out a T first. I didn't know what he meant. Then it hit me like lightning snapping through marrow, a pulse. Not just the frantic rhythm of my heart, not the ragged thunder of his, but something in between, stitched together in invisible thread. A reverberation trembling through my bones, sinking with him. I gasped, reeling back. What is that? His hand shot forward and caught my wrist. His palm burned, slick with blood, fingers caging me in iron heat. The bond, he said. Guttural. Terror knotted raw in my chest. The oath? Deeper. His ember eyes bore through me. No fire, no fury, just stark, naked truth. When blood and vow meet the moon's mark, it forges a tether, a curse. You feel what I feel. I feel what you feel. There's no severing it, no running. The air in my lungs turned to smoke. I pressed back against the wall of the cave. The tether was still there, thrumming delicate but unbreakable, every movement inside him echoing in me. Pain, fury, and beneath it all hunger, nausea churned. Heat too. No, not just mine. His kale drew in air like it cut him. His claws retracted, fully at last, his face twisting. His voice cracked sharp. You shouldn't touch me. It makes it worse. But still he didn't let go of my wrist. The pendant flared faint silver at my chest, the chain burning hot against skin. My vision swam. Worse how? He shoved me back lightly against the wall, not to hurt, to hold. His towering frame leaned, near, fever warm, eyes bright as furnaces. It draws us closer, he rasped. It feeds. If it doesn't kill us, it'll bind us until death. He was too close now, breathing sharp, ragged breaths that ghosted my lips. The tether between us pulsed harder, heat rushing into my skin. I didn't ask for this, I whispered, shaking. No one does. His head tilted lower, mouth inches from mine now, voice breaking through with something painful. But the moon doesn't care. It claims. The pendant blazed against my chest, spilling silver across the cave walls. Roots glimmered, water pools turned bright, shadows burned clean away. Kale's forehead pressed near mine, eyes flaring so fierce they seared. His words fell like vow, like curse, like prayer choked raw. And now, Lena, it's claimed us. I could feel it in my blood, not just his heat, not just the fear, but something older, a thread stitched by fate itself, binding me to him in body and bone, in pulse and breath. The cave itself seemed to tilt with its storm roaring faint outside, the whole world narrowing down to this tether, this man, this wolf, and I feared, with bone-deep certainty, that I would never be free of it again. We'll aim for 1-2 words, rich and atmospheric, ending on a cliffhanger. He was my protector. Until he became my curse. A Werewolf Romance Audiobook Section 12. The tethered Titan's cave breathed around us. Cold air seeped through cracks in the stone. Water dripped steady, the sound sharp in the silence. The storm outside had dulled to a low growl over the mountains, but the quiet in here felt louder than thunder. Kale hadn't moved. His bloody hand still wrapped around my wrist, his molten eyes locked in mine as though letting go would undo everything sealing us together. Only then did I realize my own chest wasn't moving at the same rhythm anymore. My heartbeat had slipped off, it beat with his. One pulse, two bodies. I yanked my arm back, breaking his grip. No, I said, too fast, too harsh. No, we can't, it's not, but the bond clung, invisible, even apart. My veins still thrummed his rhythm. My stomach tipped as though my body belonged less to me than it had before. Kale dragged in air like a drowning man, eyes blazing hotter for a second before dimming into something like shame. It's begun faster than I thought. What has? My voice cracked. His hands curled into fists on his knees. His claws had fully retracted, leaving only scarred fingers shaking against stone. The tether, it doesn't just link us, it leaks through us. Pain, hunger, fear. It will only tighten. A drip fell from the ceiling and shattered in a tiny pool. The sound rang louder than his words. I hugged my knees, pressing the pendant into my chest like a shield. I don't want to feel what's inside you. Do you have any idea how? Yes, he cut sharply, his snarl flicking through the cave. Because I can feel you. I froze. Yes, he continued, lower, darker, teeth bared. In restraint, your fear, your panic. His eyes flicked to the tremor in my hands, then back to mine. Your blood pounding like it's about to break your ribs. Heat crawled up my throat. Humiliation, rage, a whisper of terror. He could feel all of it, but it won't stop there. Kale pushed, voice raw. It will want more. The heat spiked, sharp. Want more what? His jaw clenched too tight as though words themselves hurt. Contact, closeness, until your breath is my breath and mine is yours. The moon marks, and the bond obeys. Something in his tone to fierce. Two pain rushed shivers across my skin. I looked away, but every nerve still buzzed with his heat. I whispered, What happens if we fight it? Kale stared into the dark, eyes dimming to embers. It breaks people, or it kills them. Sometimes both. His voice dropped more, almost inaudible. Sometimes it makes monsters worse. The silence pressed heavier. I didn't dare speak. Didn't dare breathe. The tether pulls steady between us anyway, thick as shadow, thin as silk, impossible to escape, and then like a spiderweb tangling against my senses I felt something not mine, not fear, not sorrow, hunger, gnawing hunger curling sharp in my chest, tugging at teeth that weren't mine, making the back of my tongue taste of iron. A low vibration started in my throat, and horror struck the moment I realized a growl. I slapped a hand over my mouth. Kale's gaze whipped toward me, blazing. You felt it. Not a question. I shook my head, but I knew it was useless. The bond humming between us told him the truth already. I told you. His voice cracked between triumph and horror. The wolf doesn't stay in me now. It bleeds. Into you. He was panting, fists grinding against the stone. And God's forgive me. I can feel you too. Your fire. Your fight. He cut himself off with a snarl, shaking like he could scale his own skin off. My throat went dry. I could barely whisper. Then we're not separate anymore. The words hung sharp and final between us. Kale's stare caught mine and, held like a blade, bonded by blood, bound under the moon, until it chooses to release us or ends us. The pendant throbbed hot against my chest, light spilling faint through my fingers. I shut my eyes. And in the dark, with the silver heat rising inside me, I swore I felt something that wasn't mine again. Kale's exhaustion bleeding into my shoulders, pain humming in my ribs where he was wounded. But worse than either, his longing, raw, fierce, denied. My breath hitched, and my eyes flew open. He saw it instantly. Heat flared in his face, not just fury, but shame. You shouldn't know that, he hissed. I didn't ask to. The cave flashed silver as the pendant flared. I clutched it hard enough to bite my palm. I don't want this. Neither did I. His voice dropped low, guttural, fangs catching light as his head bowed. The air around his body shimmered faint, half-shifted lines rippling under his skin. But wanting doesn't change what's already bound. You're saying, we're trapped. His ember eyes lifted, softer now, sorrow carved into them as sharp as scars. Fate rarely frees its prey. The storm outside rumbled, closer again. A howl rolled faintly over the mountains, carried by the wet air, a reminder that we weren't alone, that the hunt wasn't finished. The tether inside me pulled tighter, answering it. My stomach lurched as though something primal in me wanted to rise and howl back. Kale reached forward suddenly, grabbing both my wrists, holding me still. Though I struggled. Listen, he growled, low and fierce. If they come listen, he growled, low and fierce. If they come again, your fear will only call them faster. The bond carries it. You cannot afford to break. His forehead leaned close to mine, enough that his breath scalded the air I breathed. My chest pounded wild in rhythm with his, no longer mine alone. I won't let them have you, he whispered, voice more vow than threat. But if you fight me, Lena, the bond itself might. The pendant blazed bright, flooding the cave silver. For a second I saw us reflected in a pool of water at our feet, not two figures, but one shadow cast by two bodies, twined, indistinguishable. And as thunder cracked above the mountain, I wondered which would consume us first, Kale, the shades, or this bond tightening like a noose inside our own blood.